Hi everyone, welcome back to Behind the Post. Our next guest is the founder, owner, and principal consultant of Climate Social, an agency that has helped impact-driven organizations and thought leaders share their stories and create positive change since 2015. Prior to founding her own company, she worked at Triple Pundit, where she was recognized for leading corporate responsibility-focused Twitter chats with executive leaders garnering millions of impressions per hour. So without further ado, let's welcome Marissa Rosen to the show. Marissa, are you ready to go behind the post with me?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today.
It's a pleasure. So I'm so excited because in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about executive thought leadership on LinkedIn and why executives at your company really need to have an active voice on social. So even stats show that 56% of professionals say that they're more likely to buy for a company when their executives are active on social media. And even better, 66% of them would recommend a business if they follow one of those executives online. So it's really amazing to see the impact that an executive can have just from having a strong social media presence for a brand. But before we jump into all of it, because I know you have a lot to share on this topic, first, can you please give our audience a brief introduction to what Climate Social is and what your role entails?
For sure. Thank you. I founded Climate Social in 2015, so about 9 years ago, actually, with my background in communications and a recent master's in environmental studies. I just knew digital marketing was the way of the future, and it has been. We've seen the continued rise of sustainability in the business space, as well as companies spending more and more in digital as the years goes on. So I founded this really, as the name suggested, Climate Social. It's at the intersection of climate action and sustainable business, meeting social media and digital marketing. So I've, for now over a dozen years, worked in social media, worked with a couple different publications to start, and have then now worked with dozens of for-profits and nonprofits, both service providers and like technologies that are helping to shape a more sustainable future, to those to help them put their best face forward to the public audience, to their stakeholders, and really to educate the public about the work that they do and the type of better future they're building. So as we're going to get into here, what that really means on a day-to-day is I work both on the brand side as well as with those executive thought leaders, CEOs and founders of these organizations who are realizing the value of having their own voice in the space and using their face, their profile on LinkedIn and their network to advance their mission and their work and the work of their organization.
Yeah, it's so important and there's so much value in it, as you said. And as we know, we're going to be talking a lot about the power of executive thought leadership on LinkedIn, which you are very well versed in. So the first question I want to ask you is, why is it so important for marketing teams at B2B brands to encourage their executives to have an active voice on social?
Mm-hmm. It is. So, we see companies out there, any company, the pages are great. They get engagement. They want to have a presence, but it's even more engaging to put a human, a picture and a personality in front of your audience. I've seen great examples of, CEOs of major corporations that do this and really garner a following. They can have hundreds of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers rather, on such platforms, from Twitter or X to Instagram. But a lot of what I do is more in that B2B space here in LinkedIn to position them as a thought leader, to build credibility for the work of what they do and what the company is doing, and also really to show more transparency as well. Who are the people that are leading this organization, whether that's a nonprofit, small business, corporate. It's really, helpful for people to understand and feel like they have a connection with the individuals who are actually driving that organization.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting you're saying this because we also know the value and how important it is, and that you can position yourself as a thought leader, you can build that trust. At the same time, we know that executives are very, very busy people. They have multiple time-consuming responsibilities. And don't get me wrong, there are some executives out there that love to build a social presence online, but there are also a lot that simply don't have the time to focus on it as a priority. And also, as well, writing content for social media might just not be one of their main skills. So this is where marketing teams and social media teams can come in with an executive takeover. But before we really dive into that, I'm just wondering for our listeners, can you please explain, for those who might not be familiar, what an executive takeover on LinkedIn is?
Sure. I've done this with many different executives across different companies and organization types where they realize the value of having that presence. They know they want to be engaged on LinkedIn, but they often just don't have the time. It's not a priority for them, but they do still want to be engaged. So I can work either with their marketing team or directly with that executive and figure out, what they want to say, their cadence, kind of their campaigns that they're working towards, or simply, what's important to their organization and what do they want to put forward. So examples of that might include talking about conferences or events where they're speaking, any, press releases or news announcements from their organization that they want to amplify through their own platform. Or even just sharing industry news, what's going on in the wider space where their organization sits. Those are a few different types of content that we would put out, along with that, personal touch of maybe they want to share their own photos from recent travels or what they do on their off time with a, inspirational message. All of those sorts of pieces of content will really draw in their followers and those people who are advocates for their organization, but in a different fashion than that connection that they get directly with the brand. So it is really important for those, executive thought leaders to have a plan, a strategy, and a way to execute that LinkedIn presence.
Absolutely. So essentially, an executive takeover is ghostwriting for the executive, helping them get their LinkedIn set up, helping them understand what topics they want to do. What steps do you take to do an executive takeover that could help our listeners do it themselves?
Sure. So I'll typically get to know that person first, have an intro call with them, and then look through their profile and run an audit for them. So I'll look at every single piece of it step by step and review what do they have and what do I think they should implement instead. So from the headshot and their background photo to the tagline to the about section, the experience section, there's a lot of different pieces in there they might have, from volunteering to languages to recommendations to pages they follow. There's all these different sections within the LinkedIn profile that can be optimized and personalized for them. Both, I think it's important for them to reflect exactly who they are, but also still carry that brand voice with them too. So they might have their brand logo in their background photo, for example, or maybe they have some featured pinned posts on their profile, which highlight the prominent work that they do within that organization. So all of those different pieces I'll look through, I'll audit with them, and then we'll, discuss and we'll implement.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we'll get started there, and then we figure out what the strategy looks like from there.
Yeah. And what kind of things they want to be known for, what kind of topics.
Mhm.
It's definitely really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think while we're talking about this, it's interesting because I think there's a bit of obviously executive takeovers, you're ghostwriting for the executive, but then also they need some sort of involvement. So how involved do you think executives should be in the process of an executive takeover? Should it be left solely in marketing hands, or is it important to collaborate?
Yeah, it is important to collaborate. Ultimately, this is a person that we are representing, and their followers shouldn't really know that there is an executive team behind them. We still want to portray them as being that individual, right? So it is important that they're still representing their true self. So I find it best when it's a really collaborative effort. Sometimes if it's a CEO, they might be super busy, and so their marketing team will know them best, and I can collaborate directly with them and receive instruction from them. But other times I've found it to be a very, very fruitful relationship if I can connect directly with that person, both in the start to build that strategy, but also ongoing. A lot of times they'll just text me and say, hey, I'm going to speak here, or this is an article I'm reading. Can you please put this out for me? And having that sort of one-to-one relationship with the executive where they know that they can just ping me and then I will automatically just go and post for them in their voice is just a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And while you're talking about posting in their voice, I'm also intrigued to ask, I don't think we can have this conversation without me bringing up AI. But what is your opinion on using AI for executive thought leadership on content on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question because AI is everywhere. It is pervasive in every industry and every piece of marketing these days too, right? I find AI to be useful as a helper, but not to replace anything that I do. So I might put in some draft thoughts into my chat GPT, for example, and it could come up with something that's really spiffy and exciting and engaging. But it's really ultimately then my job to edit that AI content and make sure that it's still in the voice of the executive that I'm working for. So it helps, but will not replace. And you know what? I don't encourage anybody to rely solely on the AI because I can spot it. I really
Yeah.
can.
Oh my God, of course you can. When you're scrolling through LinkedIn and you see something and you see certain phrases, people immediately know that it's AI. So it's using it to your benefit and using it to help you. And especially with an executive takeover, it's so important that people think that it, as you said before, that it is the executive you're speaking to.
Yeah, it's helpful. You know, it helps you bring out some words that might not otherwise
Yeah.
resonate to the front of my
And
mind.
trigger ideas that you might not think about. It's
Yeah,
really useful tool. It's so, so, so helpful, but I agree with you that we shouldn't rely on it. So with that, we're going to move over to the last question. What is the best piece of social media advice you've ever received?
excellent. I love this piece of advice that I got one time, and I always still use it and share it with others. It's social media is not just B2B or B2C, how we like to classify our work, right? But it's H to H. It's human to human. So whether that is the person, the executive, or the brand, or any organization that you're engaging with on social media, there's ultimately a person behind there, and they are advocating for and working for the organization, and that's who you're trying to persuade. So it's all about that human connection. Social media is social. At the end of the day, it's a two-way street. It's relationship building. It's H to H. So it's all about thinking in that terms and, you know, using human voice in anything you do. Don't be too stuffy. Just act like we are now. And have a relationship through social and to build your, you know, connections and your marketing work that way.
Exactly, I absolutely agree. And that is literally what social is for. It's to be social, it's to connect with people online. So the minute we hide behind these, oh, it's B2B, oh, we have to talk to a business, there's still a person scrolling. So I absolutely agree with you. I think it's amazing advice. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for coming behind the post with me. Thank you for talking about your executive takeover strategy and really how important executive presence on social media is. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.